Hi, this is Ricky Keeler from Pinstriped Prospects. On this week's episode of the Pinstriped Prospects podcast, our guest is Carlos Collazo, who covers the MLB Draft for Baseball America. Carlos talked to us about some of the names that could be available when the Yankees are on the clock with the 23rd pick on Monday, June 4th. I started off by asking Carlos about the importance of this draft for the Yankees organization. We hope you enjoy this interview.
Well, I want to get started by looking at the Yankees as a whole. Obviously, the Yankees have built up one of the best farm systems in baseball, and every team in the draft, I think, has different importance to. How important do you think this draft is to an organization that has already built up a strong farm system?
Yeah, for the Yankees, it almost seems like this is kind of just adding on to their already loaded system. I mean, they've got one of the top three farm systems in the game. I think we have them as the number 2 system. And for a team like the Yankees, who have shown a propensity to spend in the free agent market, they've obviously had a lot of success turning their own players, their players in the farm system, into stars. They get big trades and big signings with guys like Stan. It almost seems like the Yankees are the team that can most afford to whiff in the draft, but they're a team that they don't really do that. They have success in pretty much every area where they're trying to acquire talent. I don't know if I'd say this is a pressing draft for them, like a team like the Royals. I would say it definitely is, with 3 picks in the first round and kind of a barren farm system. It definitely seems like the Yankees are in a pretty good situation, but it's always a good idea to continue supplementing the talent in your farm. So
it seems this is a different draft compared to 5 years ago, when the Yankees had 3 first-round picks, and everybody thought Eric Degailo would be the pick that would click, and out of the only one, it just happens to be Aaron Judge that turned out to be probably better than people expected him to be.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, when you're picking in the late first round, pretty much all the time, like it seems like the Yankees are, they never really have a ton of high picks. But picking late in the first round, you can stumble into stars. I mean, that was the case with Mike Trout to a lesser extent. You mentioned Aaron Judge, and picking at 23. It's a very deep class, I'll say that, for the Yankees. There are going to be a lot of guys who have the talent that could be middle of the first round or even top of the first round, depending on how it plays out. So there's definitely a chance that you're going to stumble into another star. And it sounds like, from what we've heard, the Yankees are really hoping to get another hitter in this draft class recently. They've taken a lot of college pitchers and pitchers in general in the top 5 rounds, at least compared to what the other teams have been doing. But there should be a number of interesting bats there at 22 for them in the first round.
You mentioned offense, and with about a week and a half to go until the draft, the Yankees have been linked to a lot of high school, prep school players. Is that the direction you think that they will go, or can they go with a college player with this pick?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for them at this point, just because a lot of what they do is going to depend on what happens in front of them. Kind of how our board lines up around that range. There are probably going to be more high school bats available, just if the draft goes exactly how we have the players ranked. Obviously, that's not how it's going to play out. I think in this first round, you'll see a lot of teams towards the top try to get those elite college bats. So one of them falling to the Yankees would be a surprise. You get to that second tier of college hitters, the Jeremy Irons of the world, maybe even the Trevor Larnachs, although I'd be surprised if he got to the Yankees at this point as well. But guys like Steele Walker, Jake McCarthy, those are some college hitters I could see. But there are a number of prep hitters that would make sense there as well. Tristan Cassis, a big slugging corner infielder out of Florida. Noah Naylor, who's a catcher and infielder out of Canada, has one of the best high school bats in this class. Even a guy like Connor Scott out of Plant High School, the same high school that Kyle Tucker went to, and actually has a pretty similar game to him, could be available in that range.
The Yankees don't have exactly the best bonus pool to work with here in this draft. I thought it was like 26. How does that low bonus pool affect the way the Yankees approach this draft?
Yeah, you said that they have the 26th biggest bonus pool, so they're kind of in that bottom tier. I think it just means they can be less creative. They kind of have to know the players on their board, what their signability is going to be, and there are going to be a number of interesting things that happen in front of them with the Rays and the Royals, who actually have the most. They have the biggest bonus pools with the 16th and 18th picks, I believe. The Rays have pick number 16, the Royals have pick number 18, and then both those teams have two other picks from 31 to 34. So a lot of creativity can go on with those clubs. For the Yankees, they're going to have a much harder time of being creative. really hard to do under the current CBA float players to your previous picks. So I imagine they're just going to have to take the best player available, try and sign them to slot or a little bit under slot, save as much money as you can here and there, but it should be pretty straightforward for them.
In the last two mock drafts, your site has had Tristan Casas as the projected pick for the Yankees. You wrote a feature about him. Can you tell us a little more about him and the power that he brings at the plate?
Yeah, Tristan is a very polished player for sure. He would be a fun guy to see in Yankee Stadium, like I mentioned in our most recent mock draft. He's very polished from a personality standpoint and as a hitter. For a guy with his power and his 70 grade raw power or more, depending on who you talk to, he has a very patient approach. He has a very good understanding of the strike zone. He knows what he's doing. He's not afraid to take a walk, and he has taken plenty of those this spring, as all the pitchers down there in that Florida area, that Miami area, know about him. He's a guy who's played with Team USA 3 times, I believe, once on the U15 team, twice with the U18 team. He's won 3 gold medals. Last summer, he was the MVP of the World Cup in Thunder Bay, Canada. He led the entire tournament in RBIs and home runs. And then he was also named the WBSC International Player of the Year, which is a very impressive honor for him to get. He's just a professional. The way he goes about the game, the way he goes about his hitting, and his defense as well. I think when he was playing with the 2016 U18 team a year ago, he learned from Nick Prado. He saw that Nick Prado was getting all the reps at first base, and he knew it's because he wasn't as good of a defender there. So he kind of took that to heart. He really got on top of his defensive game, and he's actually pretty athletic for the size that he is. He's a big kid, but he moves around pretty well in the infield. He's got a strong arm, and he's just a good kid to be around. All the players that I've talked to like playing around him. The coaches that I've talked to think he's a quiet leader and just a good guy to be around. But the bat, I mean, is the calling card. He's got some of the best power in this class.
He seems to be a safe pick here because the Yankees, obviously, they like working with those tall players, and they can fix their swings if needed. And also, when you look at the organization, I mean, third base, you got Miguel Andujar. First base, you got Greg Bird. And you got all this depth the Yankees have at the upper tiers of their system that they can afford to take their time and develop him slowly compared to other teams.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a great point. It's tough to draft for need in baseball, just given how long some of these players tend to develop. But especially when you're the Yankees and you've got a great team on the field right now, one of the best teams in the major leagues currently, with a lot of other impressive players just waiting to come up to the big league team. Yeah, you're definitely right. You have the luxury of being a little bit more patient. Maybe take one of these high school guys who's got a high ceiling, but maybe he'll need to go through the minors a little bit longer. I do think that Tristan could be one of the players in the high school class that moves a little bit quicker, just because his swing, there's not a ton wrong with it. Maybe he has a hole on the inner half because he's a long-armed guy, a big guy like you mentioned. But he does have a pretty good swing already and a good approach. So if he was one of the quicker-moving high school guys out of this class, I would not be too surprised.
One of the players that has been most intriguing for me is Anthony Keeler, the catcher out of Georgia. Switch hitter and switch pitcher. Now, the Yankees have been known to draft switch pitchers, Pat Venditti, but the switch hitting catcher spot, you don't really seem to find that often. What do you like about his game, and how does his game translate in this draft?
Yeah, I love Anthony Keeler. He is such a fun player to watch. He's a very energetic, passionate player. He's definitely the heart of his Cartersville high school team. They actually just recently lost the state championship in in Georgia, the 4A state championship. It's best of 3 in Georgia. And in his last at-bat as a high school player, he homered. And he's homered regularly all spring. He is a switch pitcher, like you mentioned. He gets into the upper 80s from either side. I think when he's right-handed, which is how he catches. He's a right-handed catcher. He doesn't catch left-handed. But when he's right-handed on the mound, I think he's gotten up to as high as 92. If he went to college, he could definitely be a catcher and a switch pitcher. From a pro perspective, he's definitely a catcher, though. He could be a plus defensive catcher, and his bat plays from either side of the plate. But again, he's a very polished bat, like Tristan Casas. He's hit at pretty much every event he's been to over the summer showcase circuit and throughout this spring. So he would be a fun one as well, and he's going to be one of the first catchers you see come off the board.
It seems as if there is a need the Yankees address, and obviously in the draft you don't go for need as much. I would think it would be catcher. You mentioned Naylor and Keeler just because Gary Sanchez is up there, but the Yankees' depth outside of maybe Austin Romine and Kyle Higashioka to an extent, there's not much top prospect depth for the Yankees at catcher. Is that uncommon in baseball, or is it something that the Yankees really should look at down the road in this draft?
No, yeah, I don't think it's uncommon at all. In fact, I think with catchers, we've heard it from scouts all spring. If you have a catcher that shows some tools and shows some ability, teams are very willing to run those guys higher up the draft, just because finding a good catcher who can be a regular player is one of the more difficult positions to fill. Now, when you talk about high school catchers, historically, that is also one of the riskier demographics of the draft. High school catchers have a pretty high bust rate. I don't know the specific numbers off the top of my head. But, yeah, I think if you can fill a need at catcher and you're picking on the board where a guy like Anthony Keeler seems to be one of the better players available, at least based on what we've been hearing, it would definitely be a great situation for the Yankees or for any team that really has a need with catching. You can never really have too many catchers just because it seems like a lot of teams are going to more of a tandem kind of role, filtering guys back and forth, resting guys. Obviously, you can't play as regularly, excuse me. I don't even know if regularly is a word, as routinely. You can't play as routinely as a catcher. You got to have more time off. So if you can get guys like this, and I mean, it's not like Anthony Keeler can't be an impact hitter. He definitely can be. That's why he's being talked about in the range he is. He might not get to the Yankees. I know there are a number of teams who are drafting in front of them who are in on him. The Rockies specifically seem to have been in on him very, very heavy throughout this spring. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes.
Last year, the Yankees did go pitcher the first couple of picks with Clark Schmidt and Matt Sauer. If they do decide to go pitcher either with pick 23 or pick 61 in the second round, who are some names that Yankee fans should be keeping an eye on for those picks?
Yeah, we can just run through some of the pitchers. There's a number of prep righties, I think, and prep lefties, just prep pitchers in general. The thing about this draft is, regardless of where you're picking, there should be a very talented high school arm that you can take and feel pretty happy with. It'll be interesting to see kind of how the industry reacts to high school pitching, again, being a very risky demographic, and kind of balance that with the depth of arms that are in this class specifically. But some of those guys who could be in play for the Yankees in their first pick are guys like Mason Dennerberg, a right-handed pitcher out of Florida who's been up to 97 at times, uber athletic. Grayson Rodriguez, a righty out of Texas. He's kind of a pop-up guy of the year. He's up to 97, 98 with ease, a 4-pitch mix. Some other guys. Did you ask about high school specifically or just pitchers in general?
Just pitchers in general. If you have a college name or two, that would.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a lefty like Ryan Rollison might be a very good value if he gets to 24. He's got 3 pitches. He's a high-floor college left-hander who struggled this year, but I think the industry does see him as one of the most talented left-handers in this class. And if he slips in the draft and gets to the Yankees, he would be another guy who's probably a really good value there because he was a player who was a top 10 talent at the beginning of the season.
Last year, the Yankees, we mentioned, took Clark Schmidt, was coming off of Tommy John surgery. Are there any players coming off of injury that are intriguing going into this draft?
Yeah, definitely. Dennerberg, who I just mentioned, not as extreme as Clark Schmidt. He battled some biceps tendonitis, I believe, this spring. He actually just pitched recently and was pretty good. So he looks good to go. Another high school pitcher is Mike Bassel. He's out of the Northeast, Boston College High School. He's shown very impressive upside, 4-pitch mix, starter traits. He had an injury earlier this spring. He's been back recently. On the college side, you have a guy like Tristan Beck, who maybe fits that bill more. He's a guy who missed Stanford right-hander. He missed the entire season last year with a back injury. He's been back this year. His stuff was up to the standards he'd set for himself previously at the beginning of the year. It's kind of faded off as the season has gone on, but a lot of the guys that I've talked to think that might just be because his conditioning isn't where it was, having missed so much time. So he's another interesting guy that could be a former injury pitcher that fits in that spot. Those are some of the guys who kind of jumped out to me right away.
Correct me if I'm wrong on Beck, but haven't the Yankees taken him before?
I believe he was drafted out of high school. I can search really quick to tell you if he was the guy that they popped, but you might be right. Yeah, you're right. 17 actually, and the 29th round. So he's definitely a guy that they're interested in, at least last year. It seemed pretty obvious at the time that he wasn't going to actually sign that late. But yeah, that's a good call.
So as we look at the general draft class, and you guys go through so many players. We'll get into your Baseball America 500 in a little bit. Who is your favorite player?
My personal favorite player? That's a good question. I think Nick Madrigal is the guy who jumps out. He's obviously very highly ranked, and I can give you a guy kind of further down that's more of a cheese ball, as we say here, a guy who you like more than maybe you should. But Madrigal's the guy that I got to see as a high school kid. Actually, when I was interning with Baseball America, I was just very impressed with his defensive actions, and he's hit so much better than I ever expected him to hit. Another guy this year is Bryce Terrain. He's a guy whose stock has fallen a bit this spring, but I love him. Every time I see him, he hits really well. He's a plus runner, plus defensive shortstop. I think he's going to stick there. Left-handed hitting guy. Very polished approach at the plate. He really knows what he's doing. I think he struck out, just once in his junior season. And he's kind of tapped into a little bit more power this spring at times. Going further off the board, Blaze Alexander is another shortstop. I guess I like these middle infielders. He maybe has the strongest arm of any infielder in the class. He popped a 99 across the diamond last summer. He's just a very flashy player, very confident defensively, has a ton of plus actions from the shortstop position. And he also has bat speed and surprising pop for how small he is. He's not a tiny guy, but he's definitely a slight infielder. He's a South Carolina commit. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. But those are a few that come to mind right away.
You mentioned middle infielders, and one guy you brought up earlier, Jeremy Ironman. You look at his numbers, and yet he goes to Missouri State, but he's a 20 stolen base guy. Last year he was crazy with the power numbers.
Mm-hmm.
How would he fit in potentially with the Yankees, who have gone shortstop in the past, but a more defensive shortstop and kind of older a few years ago?
Yeah, when you're talking about Ironman, he's definitely not that defensive centered shortstop. He's definitely more of an offensive focused guy. There are some people who believe he might have to move off the position, but he has all the tools to stick there. He's maybe just not as twitchy laterally back and forth. But he is a good runner, like you mentioned, the stolen bases. I think he's a better runner than maybe I would have thought coming into the year. Above average or plus, depending on who you talk to. But he's got plus arm strength, plenty of arm to stick at the position, and he's got plus power as well. I think the thing with him is his season just hasn't been as loud as maybe you wanted. And over the summer last year, there were some questions as well. But he is the best college shortstop in the class, so he's a very interesting fit there.
Looking at it from a general draft perspective, most people believe you guys have had this player mocked number one for as long as you guys have had mock drafts, and Auburn right-hander Casey Mize. What, as he gets set as we record to pitch in the SEC tournament for Auburn, what has stood out to you about him, the way he's pitched this year?
Yeah, Mize, I think you nailed it. He has been locked into the number one spot since we started doing the mock drafts. He very quickly moved into the number one spot overall once we updated our top prospects list as the season rolled on. And I believe at this point everyone who ranks players for the draft has him number one. He's definitely the consensus top guy. The thing that separates him from the rest of the pitchers, in my mind, is just the stuff combined with the pitchability. He's got 60 grade pitches across the board or better. You look at his fastball, it's a plus pitch, maybe a 65 grade offering. Fastball into the mid-90s, up to 97 at times. He's got a split change that is a 70 grade offering, maybe the best off-speed pitch in the class. It's a wipeout pitch that he locates extremely well, and that's a pitch that's not very easy to control, especially for an amateur. Look at a slider, that's a plus pitch, another variation of a changeup that's above average or plus. And he's also added a cutter this year on top of everything that's also a plus pitch. But it's not just that. You look at his strikeout to walk ratio. Last year he led all Division I arms in strikeout to walk ratio. This year he's striking out batters at a higher rate, and he's walking batters at a lower rate. So that those numbers have only improved. And the biggest thing with him personally is that he's been healthy. He's a guy who's had some medical questions in the past. He had to be shut down last spring and parts of last summer with forearm injuries. And this spring he's taken the ball every time out and gone deep into games and thrown well. So that makes him the kind of clear-cut number one guy for us, and for everyone else, for that matter.
How does he stack up? Like, he doesn't have the hype of the Steven Strasburgs of the world, the David Price, the Garrett Cole. Is he a tier below that? Can he get to that tier down the road?
Yeah, we've actually had this discussion kind of internally. Excuse me. We haven't had a number one, like an obvious number one player in the last few years of the draft, but I do think he's still below the tier of the Steven Strasburgs and the Garrett Coles, like you mentioned. I don't know if the stuff and track record is that loud. He has 60s across across the board, but if you look at Steven Strasburg's draft report that we have on our site, you kind of stack it up to Casey Mize. And even the strikeouts, obviously Strasburg wasn't pitching in the SEC, but it was definitely a level above. I don't think Mize is quite there, but I think he's closer than some of the other pitchers recently would have been.
Last question before I get into the work that you guys are doing at Baseball America. Right now you got the conference tournaments going on. The regionals will be next week. For someone that may be watching that kind of baseball for the first time, what is that like, and does it affect how you guys rank toward the end of the process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, if you haven't watched college baseball or the regionals and super regionals specifically, definitely check it out. It's a very high energy atmosphere. Fun thing about college baseball compared to professional baseball is that teams definitely seem to have more of a specific identity and even a playing style that kind of differentiates them. At the major league game, it's kind of a just power game across the board. Teams are trying to hit for power, put a bunch of power levers in the game. But at the college game, you've got teams that are focused on pitching and defense, small ball, some teams that are more power oriented. So that's kind of fun just from a general college baseball perspective. And then in regards to players and their draft stock, there are definitely some players who have a chance to kind of move up boards or fall depending on how they do. I think college hitters, it's the area where teams wait the most on. They're the most patient with these college hitters, kind of seeing what they do. Guys like Seth Beer and Griffin Conine, that's a Clemson first baseman outfielder and Duke outfielder. They've struggled throughout the spring, but both of them really seem to have turned it on towards the end of the year. That's definitely helping their draft stock. A guy like Jake McCarthy, who's a Virginia outfielder, he's been injured much of the year and is just now coming back. So teams are definitely trying to get looks at him to see how he looks, and he could definitely shoot up boards depending on what he does. Those are just a few to name. But yeah, I think it definitely matters. At this point, teams have gotten tons of looks at most of these guys. So I don't know how much you're going to move, how significantly you can move in the last week or so, just because that might be a little bit too reactionary. But you can definitely push the needle for yourself.
You brought up the ACC. It's not March Madness, but North Carolina did lose to Pittsburgh a couple nights ago. So you never know what can happen.
Yeah, it's wild for sure. And North Carolina last year just lost in their own regional, didn't even get out of it with that Fun Davidson story. So it's always exciting. I think we just had a 17-run inning with Clemson the other day, so you never know what you're going to see.
So as we get into what you guys do at Baseball America, of course, you guys rank so many prospects. You got all this mock draft coverage. What can the listeners expect when they log onto your website, and what do you guys have planned over the next week and a half heading into the draft?
Yeah, definitely. The big thing is with the A500. We do this every year. It's our annual list of the top 500 prospects in the country. That's college, four-year university, junior college, high school. Currently, we are in the process of filling out the entire reports for that list. So we're still tweaking it here and there as we get more information, some pop-up players here, a player getting injured there. So we're still reporting on actually finalizing that list. But a lot of my time, J.J. Cooper's time, the next few days is going to be spent actually writing up those reports. I think we're well into the 300s and 400s at this point. So check that out now. You can see the top 200 reports. All 500 will be up on the site very soon. We also have state lists that come out after that, kind of breaking down every region in the country, how it stands up. Another new feature that we've added this year is kind of a team draft history and projections piece. We'll have every team basically breaking down what they've done recently at the top of the draft, if any tendencies pop out that we notice, and then players who are fits for that team in the first round, either who we've heard teams are interested in, who just make sense based on what the team has done, or just fit there at that team's pick, depending on where we have guys ranked. So a lot of good stuff there, in addition to all the college coverage that we have from our college writers.
And how can the listeners follow you on Twitter? And I understand you're doing work for the draft with MLB Network, correct?
Yeah, that's super exciting. So on Twitter, you can follow me at Carlos A. Collazo. And this year, actually, MLB Network is going to have me on their day one draft coverage. So I will be up there on TV with Jim Callis, kind of breaking down the first day guys, with John Manuel kind of moving to the Twins, kind of jumping into that role for him. So big shoes to fill, and I'm excited for it. But yeah, if you want to check me out talking about the draft, or just check out the draft in general, check out MLB Network, and and it also will be streamed on MLB.com, I believe.
So Monday, June 4th, 6 o'clock, you know where to go. Check out Carlos and all the MLB Network team on the draft. Carlos, again, you guys do such great work. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule, and keep up the great work. It's been fun to read.
Yeah, no, thanks. I appreciate you having me. Thanks for the kind words, and best of luck to you, man.
Thank you.